So let's complete 4.2. In 4.2 part 1, we of course implemented the display results display module. In part 2, we're going to set ourselves up for something we're going to need for next week. So not directly related to our results, but in a way it is, because at this point, think about the results that we have, right? Now, in my output right now, and you can do this, and I want you to, is actually I went through and removed all the console.logs that I had. Oh, not this one. I had them in, I had them in my results, display results function. I had them in there. I think I had them in my form handler and maybe calculate household. So all you want to have right now, just to kind of play with this, is only to have the form data that's from the app.js, and then the calculated results also from the app.js. So in this case, all I want you to have are these two console logs, and just comment out the rest of them. And the reason I want you to do that is that we're setting ourselves up now for thinking about long term. So right now, when somebody enters, and I just did a default, I suppose I could call it, submission, this is the output. But as soon as the page is reloaded, this data only exists in the memory of the computer right now. Okay, and so this is what we call in memory. And this is also called volatile data. So volatile data means whenever I refresh the page, that's gone. So what we want to do over time is we want to make our data persistent. I've talked about the idea of CRUD, where we create data, we read data, we update, and we delete. In order to do all those functions, we have to have a way to make data persist. Okay, so this step is setting us up for that persistence. Okay, so all the work we're going to do this time is going to be in the app.js. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to just put our part 2, right? Our part 2 store. And actually, I realized this earlier. I already had this in here, which was just, and I did this when we did the first part, but I didn't even talk about this because I knew we were going to do it next. So we're going to display, oh, no, I'm sorry. No, we didn't. Yeah, right here. Store, there it is. Store entries. That's the name of this one. So we do have it in here already. So we've already done this part, and so now we're going to store the entries in an in-memory array. So we got introduced to arrays, just as a reminder, when we were doing the query selector all, right? This was returning a list of the references based on our condition. Okay, so we got, and I did an introduction then about how to reference items in the array. I showed you how to hard code, but now we're going to get another introduction to arrays because they are very, very important to us. So in our app.js, inside of our event, outside right at the top, because first what we're going to do is actually declare an array. Okay, now this array is going to be something that we'll use again and again because it's going to store our data. Now, in this case, we're storing the data in memory, so it's still volatile, but at least it is together. Okay, so we're going to declare const, and we're going to say carbon footprint entries. Okay, and we're going to actually make this in this term we've talked about, which is a literal. Okay, so remember when we did the object literal? Well, this is an array literal. Okay, so we're defining an array. Okay, this array, and let's go ahead and put this as well, right? Right. Okay, so we use const because we'll end up updating this with entries, but we will not declare it again as a particular kind of variable. So we can use const here. Okay, so we'll update what's in here, but we will never give it another name, the array. So we'll update the array, but the actual variable itself will not change. Okay. And that's what this says. This is what, and I actually had already put the other part of that. Now I'm just putting it together. Okay, we'll change as we add entries. But for this first introduction, so first, and the other thing about this is that this is a global. Okay, remember we really tried to limit the things that we have in global. As a matter of fact, we could talk about this one, because the fact that this one is a little different color immediately tells me it's not used in my code. So you might wonder, well, if it's not used here and I want to minimize, you know, can I do that? And the answer is yeah. And that's when you start thinking about this idea. I just want to make sure. I was pretty sure it hadn't. And it's probably something we could have done earlier, but it's okay to do it now as we're talking about this. Because remember, the idea here is that these are globals. So this is a global variable. Okay. All right, so now in our dev tools, okay, we're going to set a breakpoint right here. And then we're just going to load the page, refresh. We'll stop here. Oh, I forgot to put a semicolon, but that's all right. Okay, let's go ahead and step in. So now that we've defined that array, okay, we now, and again, this array is actually just defining an empty array. So we're using array literal syntax. Okay, so that's what this open brackets and close brackets, this syntax is what creates an array literal. Remember we were talking about the object literal and how the object literal was done with this syntax, right? So then array syntax is, when we do this, we're just creating a literal array. Okay, now this just basically, in this case, we're using the syntax, it's a literal array, but we're also creating, and we should say this right here, an empty. Now we're going to end up modifying, you'll see how we do this over time, how we handle this global, because we'll end up saving things and then repopulating and doing some other things to it. But, you know, they're just to understand it. But now to actually kind of play with it, because this is what's kind of nice. If I hit tab here or type it in, it's like, okay, it's just an empty array. I have methods. There's all kinds of methods. You're going to learn some today. One would be length. Okay, so right now there's nothing in it, so there is 0 in length. Now how can I update it? We'll learn, and we'll do that next. But if I just wanted to do something simple, like, and these are methods, and part of what I'll have you research is the most common method, but the one you're going to see today is a .push. Basically it says push something into the array. So let's say you push your name, okay? So in this case, I'm writing on here, I'm not writing in code, but if I do a push to that, right? Okay, now if I go back and I say, show me what's in that, right? Now I have, and these arrays are also, you will hear of, if you've taken other languages, called a list, okay? So it's a list of items, unlike an object that has a key value pair, right, or a property value. This is just a single item, and this can be any data type, which is also true, by the way, for for object literals. But object literals are different in the sense that you have that key and that value. Here you just have an item. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's go back to the push again. Again, follow along here. And now instead of that, put, right, 42. For those of you in the know will laugh, maybe. Okay, so now if I scroll back up and I say, hey, show me that array, because now it's not an empty array. Okay, now it's actually still a global array, but it has, in this case, 2 items. So if I was to scroll back up and say, hey, show me the length of that, it's 2. Okay, now remember what I said about arrays, they're 0 indexed, okay, which means even if there's 2 items, if I want to refer to the first one, okay, I use that bracket and I say 0. Okay, so if I want to specifically say show me the first item, or if I want to say show me the last item in this instance, because there's actually other ways to point to the last item in the array, because oftentimes, most likely, you won't know how many items are in the array. The lat length will tell you that. Okay, and then you could do -1 on that, but there's also just so much more. Again, you're going to learn so much more about this. So let's actually add something else and put true. Okay, so now if I go and look at just the array itself, now I have 3 items in there, right? I have a string, I have a number, and I have a boolean. Cool. So, and I know how to reference them. I know how to call a method to update them. There are actually other ways to update them as well, but this is the method we're going to use today. But I just wanted to give you a little introduction to arrays, because in using an array today, and let's actually end with this, we're going to use a push, but we're going to say, okay, we're actually going to combine these two things, the object literal and the array, okay, into one thing. So let me show you what this looks like. So now I have, right, so now I have 4 entries in here, but one of these entries is an object, right? So if I wanted to reference that entry, so in this case, right, I have 4. Would I do it this way? And no, remember it's index, so you have to go 3 because it starts with 0. And now you can see that I have an object, literal, in my array. And this is, in combining these two things together, if we don't talk about them separately, it may be a little hard to reason about. Okay? All right, so now that we've done that, again, we are going to actually do a little more work. This happened to me earlier, and I actually couldn't figure out where this happened. Okay, so let me go here, hit inspect again. I don't know why it zooms my mouse. I hit something on my mouse that goes zoom in. Okay, so now that we have that, right, which is awesome. So now we're going to think about, what do we want to store? So every time the user submits something, okay, when they submit their form data, their carbon footprint inputs, so we want to capture the form data and we want to capture the calculated results. Okay, so these two right now, we have them as separate, right, separate objects. Okay, remember, object literals, right, 2 of them. So what we want to do is combine them into one object that we then push into the array. So let's do this, and then we'll talk about it as we're there. Okay, so we're going to do this particular work after we get the results. Okay, after we get the calculated results, before we display. Now, could we do this the other way around? Absolutely, we could. Okay, so actually, let me see. I think we have, right. So let's actually, this is going to be the first thing. Is what we're going to do here is we're going to combine, right? We're going to combine the inputs into a single object. Okay, so that's what we're going to create. So in this case, we're going to give it a name. We're going to say const new entry. Okay, so like a new form entry is equal to that object literal. Okay, and again, I just showed you the idea of setting up what you need to do, how an object differs from an array in that it has keys and values, right? So, but to see this, right, we want to take all the form data and all the calculated results data, but we're going to use a new operator. And because if we weren't doing this new operator, we'd have to reference each of those individually, right? Now, this is not the way we're going to do it, but we'd have to form data dot, right? In order to not have to do that work, because JavaScript has a way to do it, we just say, hey, let's use this spread operator. This spread operator is awesome because what it's going to do is going to take all of the form data. And let's just see this first. And actually, because it's only one, I don't have to do this. Okay, so let's go here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go right here. And because this is inside the form handler, good, we're here. And let's just step into here. So notice from DevTools, it tells you exactly what happened. So right now, our new entry, by doing this spread operator, takes all the keys and the values and just creates a new, we're object literal with those event, like look how many are in there, right? So if we were to do, right, so look at all, that's not the right, yeah it is, yeah it is, because it's the form data, right? So now we have all of these in our new entry, okay? So it's just a quick, and the spread operator is very, very awesome. So because it just saves you so much work that you'd have to do. So now we're going to say, also give me, right, the calculated results. Awesome. So now we have combined, let's just show this, okay? Let's go ahead and submit right here, okay? So now when I run this, so now my entry, my new entry, right, is both my form data, all of my form, but now here's the other thing. This is listed alphabetically, notice this, right? So when we look at this, we can see diet type, footprint, food packaging, packaging footprint, right? So it's combining those things together. And it's actually not combining them together. I'm sorry, that's the bad way to, that's not the right way to say this. It's actually you doing them in alphabetical order, right? That's really what I was trying to say. Or I didn't say well. But in this case, the spread operator is really, really cool. So what else do we want to know about this? So remember, we're people who are thinking about, somebody's giving me data. What else would I want to know about this data? And so I'm going to actually add something else to this object that we are going to next week actually store and keep. But at least this week we can build it. I'm going to create a timestamp. So that's my key. Okay, and now how I do my timestamp, matter of fact, I'm going to do it on the console first. So there's something that you will see later in JavaScript where we actually take the idea of an object and we actually program with OOP, object-oriented program, where we build something that is beyond a object literal, that actually encapsulates the idea of actually programming and building objects that have functionality, that can be encapsulated, that can do inheritance. And if you don't know those words, don't worry, but it's just a higher, more sophisticated way to do that. And when this new operator is the way that we do it. But we're going to call new, and we're going to call date. Okay, so notice down here, if you can see this, is that when you call new date, here's what you get, Wednesday, and you can see actually when I'm recording this, Pacific time, and it's an object. Actually, this is what gets returned from new date. Okay, so this object now is something we could do other methods on. There are many you'll learn over time. Again, the more JavaScript you do, the more stuff of this you go in deep. If your app needs a specific date time, all we want to know is in our entry that we're building, what time was that done? And actually, you'll see later how we end up using this. But to kind of make it a little more easy to digest from that standpoint, we'll call new date, like I just showed you. But we're going to call a method on it called toISO string. Okay, and we'll call that. Now, we could go down here and we could actually show you there it is. So string, okay, call that method. So then so what happens is it first creates the object and then it calls the string on it, and so we end up getting a string. So from here we got an object and here we got a string, and this string is unique to not just the day and time that will be helpful, but actually a unique identifier of this entry, and that's the way we'll end up using it. Okay, all right, so let's come back over here. So now we have, right, all the form data, all the calculated results data, and we have an additional, matter of fact, let's just go ahead and watch this run so you can see the whole object in its entirety. that we just this, okay, entry. Oh, I love that. 2. 2 ISO, right? 2 ISO. There it is. Okay. Typing. Okay. See if I got it this time. By the way, troubleshooting and troubleshooting is one way we talk about it, finding errors in your code. And generally that's the benefit of actually coding, testing, because if you code, and then test, it's hard to find errors. So let's actually, oh, I already had this. Let's let that run. Good. Good. Okay, so now let's look at that new entry. Okay, so new entry now. So not only do we have all the form data, not only do we have all the results data, but we have this timestamp. Okay, so we've built up our object literal. Okay, remember we've been using this object literal for a while. We've been introduced now to arrays twice. So, but this sets us up to say, okay, I want to save this in a list because I'm going to have multiple of them. Okay, so let's actually do that. Let me see if I've gotten all the comments. Okay, we did this. Okay. Oh, I already talked about the spread operator, didn't I? Okay. So actually we'll do this, date and time. Okay. Spread operator. Copy all. Okay, so we copied all the properties from calculated results. Added a timestamp that was created. Okay. Oh, actually, I should have also said copied all the ones from form data. Okay. So now we use the date now, which is what this new date is. They'll create, and this by the way, and this is very cool. This new date thing is, there's a lot more as you're in your research, you'll see me have you do some understanding about what this is. But it's basically a way just to say, hey, current date and time. That's really what that is creating, which you saw a minute ago when we did it. Okay. So now that we've built this object up, okay, we've said, okay, now that we have it, what are we going to do with it, right? What are we going to do with this object? What we're going to do is we're going to actually do this. We're going to do carbon footprint entries, and you've already seen me do a dot push, and now we're going to push the new entry. Okay, so every time the user submits this, and we're going to see this, I'll show you this because we're going to do it, but that's what this line is doing. Okay, so we'll do this. Okay, and actually we could have put these comments where they were. That might have been helpful. And then we'll log. We'll put this. So then we'll do that, and then we'll actually go log. Okay, so that log, right? Carbon footprint entries here. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out that one. I'm going to comment out this one because we've been, oh, not that one, this one. Okay, so let's actually see this in action now. All right, let's see if I have any errors. Okay, so let's actually do a real one. Okay, so let's do 5 people in the house. Big house. Okay, let's do this. I like to try to do variety. Okay, oh, we have a new entry. Cool. We pushed it, and now let's console log it. Okay, so now we have one entry. Notice there's length of 1. We have all the things I showed you before, which is awesome. But check this out. Now we can actually, if I don't clear the form, it'll just take the values I had before, right? So let's just modify them because that will change it. I'm actually going to take off this, let it run. Okay, so now I have 2 entries. Do it again. I have 3 entries. Do it again. So this allows us to keep track of each entry not only the input data, but also the calculated data and a timestamp. So this is really, really helpful when we are going to then present data back, because ultimately, in addition to the current entry, let's clear it for now, right? And by the way, this is still in memory, right? So this carbon footprint, right? Actually, it's not right. No, I don't think, because the page has finished loading. Yeah. So once we lose context, by the way, and I should probably talk about that, but basically once the page completes, then we lose the context without having a breakpoint. But this is the point, is that we can track this data, but it's still in memory, it's still volatile. So even if we hit, calculate many times, it's only available to us in memory, but next week we'll make it persistent. Okay, cool. So check out these things, explain the REST operator in JS and how it's used, explain date now, which is basically our calling new date in JavaScript, how to choose, and what are the most common methods to update arrays. Okay, and I should have put something in here, probably will be different by the time you see it, about understanding the array versus object literal syntax. Okay, the last commit for this 4.2 section, and we'll move on to week 5. See you later.